Long ball number 2 on a Wednesday. Thomas Müller is going to the Vancouver Whitecaps. At least that's the reporting. Tom Bogert, I actually believe Manuel Vet of Transfer Market was the first one to have this. In fact, Transfer Market went ahead and put together the graphic that shows Thomas Müller in the Vancouver Whitecaps shirt. He hasn't put this on yet. This is not real. He has never worn this shirt, but this is what we do, right? As soon as a player is linked and as soon as it looks like it's happening, we get these pictures. It says imminent from Transfer Market. So shout out to Manuel Vet. And then that story picked up by Tom Bogert. I believe even Fabrizio Romano was posting about this. Muller's 35. You see it right there in the parentheses. He's 35 years old. He comes off that incredibly successful career with Bayern Munich, all the trophies won, all the goals scored, all the things that he's done. I'm a fan of Thomas Müller, of his game, of his attitude, and I absolutely think that will be a boon to Vancouver, sort of regardless of what he ultimately contributes. I think there are some questions around how does he make Vancouver better? I just mean, like, every player that arrives, you have to ask that question. How does Thomas Müller make Vancouver better? And we are talking about one of the top teams in Major League Soccer in 2025. I mean, Vancouver is not a team that screams, we need this guy in order to compete this year, in order to, say, make a playoff push. Vancouver is already lined up to be a high seed in the Western Conference, barring a collapse. Right now in second place, 45 points, a point back of San Diego with a game in hand on San Diego FC. And they're sort of nominally in the Supporters' Shield race, of course. And a lot of this has been driven by, now, Pedro Vite moving on, that's definitely a thing that Vancouver's having to deal with. But Sebastian Berhalter in that midfield, Brian White, the 2 U.S. internationals have been obviously key to this. So when you bring in Thomas Müller, what role does he play? Are you asking him to sort of be a number 10? He's sort of always been more of an off-striker kind of player, a second striker. Can he play that way with Brian White? What is the dynamic there? Those are interesting things for Jesper Sorensen to figure out for the Vancouver Whitecaps. And it is, you would rather have that problem than not. This is a formative change in the approach that the Vancouver Whitecaps have taken to team building in their MLS history. I mean, they've never been a team that has been connected to sort of big flashy names. I can't remember if maybe we've had a little bit of a dalliance here or there or something that didn't come to fruition. But this is certainly the biggest name that they've ever signed. I think it's interesting that Thomas Müller at 35 is willing to go play on that turf at BC Place in Vancouver, because from what we know, that is one of the worst surfaces in Major League Soccer. I don't know if he knows exactly what he's walking into there. Now, obviously, this story also comes with everybody being reacquainted with the MLS discovery process. And that is that has been a discussion point for a number of years. Here is the rule as it is written on the MLS website. Pursuant to the discovery process, clubs may scout and sign players who are not yet under contract to MLS and who are not subject to another assignment mechanism, like the Super Draft. To sign a player through the discovery process, the club must first place the player on its discovery list. A club may have up to 5 players on its discovery list at any time and may remove or add players at any time. There's no limit to how many players a club can sign from its discovery list. Expansion Club San Diego actually got 2 more slots in 2025 up to the roster compliance date, and then they got that reduced to 5. This is the rule as it is written. There are some other things involved, obviously, in this. What always strikes people as odd is that Major League Soccer is saying you need to put a multiple trophy winner, a German international, a player with a resume as deep as Thomas Müller, a player everybody in the world football is aware of. You have to put them on your discovery list. You have to do something that makes it feel like you're discovering them. And I understand the frustration with this because it is incongruent with the terminology. But I'm going to bring up something that I saw on Blue Sky from our friend Andrew Wisnowski, who has been a previous guest on this show. Look, I responded to it at the top, but you can see it in the middle. MLS is terrible about its terms of art, right? This is just the words they use to describe things within the rules. Discovery had nothing to do with special discovery, which is a totally different mechanism that allows clubs to amortize transfer fees and things like that. The allocation list had almost nothing to do with general allocation money. Generation Adidas players are wholly unrelated to the Generation Adidas Cup. Now, that is marketing stuff about Adidas that I do think is ugly and not easy to understand, but maybe slightly different. But Andrew says this is a nightmare. And down there, read that down. That's that reply to himself. Just call. Actually, this is a reply to me because I was saying that MLS doesn't have to do it this way. Right? It doesn't have to be this arcane. It doesn't have to be this difficult to understand. And even if you agree that MLS has budget rules that make sense in order to maintain a competitive field of teams, right? When you go into the season, you have some belief that your team can do something good, even when they are poorly run, because there are playoff spots and parity is a part of the MLS structure. Debating parity is a different conversation, but even if you believe that those are good rules, the way MLS makes it difficult to understand them is an impediment to people becoming big-time fans of this league. I really believe that. I really believe that you create an environment where I've got to read the rules and I've got to dive into these arcane mechanisms and terminology in order to understand it. Needlessly complicated. That's right, Chris. Chris says it's needlessly complicated. Now, that's exactly what this is, right? Andrew saying, just call Discovery negotiation priority, and 75% of the complaints would be gone. Now, again, there are certainly a lot of people who would say, you don't even need that. You don't even need negotiation priority. You shouldn't have that. Why not just let players sign with whoever they want and let teams make their offers, and the player will pick the best offer, and that's it. It's all done. I am at that point that the evolution of Major League Soccer has taken us to a point where that should be the next step, right? Or something that is a loosening of some of these rules that are always meant to restrict the labor market so that a player can't just play one team off another. It took a long time. If you're old enough, and you can tell by the white in my beard that I am, you remember when MLS did not have free agency. It did not exist in Major League Soccer. A player's contract would end, and they could not sign with anybody else if they wanted to. And again, that was all about Major League Soccer saying, we don't want players to be able to drive up their price by going to one team and saying, well, this other team's going to give me this much. If you want me, you got to pay me more than that. Because controlling labor costs was central to the way that Major League Soccer was designed back in the mid-90s and started in 96. And it's why single entity exists. It's why that concept of single entity was created. Because as long as MLS is one business, they cannot be accused of anti-competitive behavior within the league, because all of the teams are part of the same company. And that way they could say, you can't go out into the marketplace and drive up your price. I do think they need to change at least the terminology if we're doing this. And this is a good point. MLS players are still officially signed with MLS, right? That the ITCs are held by MLS. The clubs don't have individual contracts. The clubs are operators. The player is assigned to the club by the league. Even if there's really even if we're just talking about sort of like the paperwork of it, and it really isn't in terms of the way it operates, different than a team signing with the player signing with the team. It definitely is that. MLS is communism. This is an interesting thing to talk about. It's not as a business, but it is within itself. So now we're peeling back the layers of the onion. Is there a specialized MLS lawyer degree? Asks Angus. That's a good question. We should bring Andrew back on the show and see if there's something about that. I do think that in terms of sports law, MLS is a wrinkle that is difficult for some people really to kind of put into the bigger picture of doing sports law. So there's that.